Chapter 1. The Winding Road. The purr of the Cadillac's engine was a contented sound, a sleek chrome and steel beast tamed for the open road. From her perch in the spacious back seat, Lisa Trevor watched the world transform. The last familiar landmark, a cheerful red barn with a faded Coca-Cola advertisement painted on its roof, had slipped past the window 20 minutes ago. Now, the landscape was a blur of motion and color, a world dissolving into the abstract. The familiar, orderly suburbs of their city, with their neatly trimmed lawns and identical houses, had given way to rolling farmland, a patchwork quilt of gold and brown under the descending autumn sun. That, in turn, had yielded to the dense, untamed wilderness of the Arklay Mountains. The highway began to climb, and with every mile, the world grew quieter, wilder. "Are we almost there, Father?" she asked for what felt like the dozenth time, the question less about genuine curiosity and more a protest against the crushing boredom of the long drive. She had finished her book, a worn paperback copy of A Wrinkle in Time, an hour ago, and had since resorted to counting out-of-state license plates, a game that had quickly lost its appeal in the increasingly sparse traffic. George Trevor glanced in the rear-view mirror, his eyes magnified slightly by his thick-rimmed glasses crinkling at the corners. "Patience, little songbird. Great things are worth the journey. We're about to turn onto the private access road now. Another 15 minutes, perhaps." "You said that an hour ago?" Lisa mumbled, slumping back against the plush leather seat. "Did I?" George chuckled, unperturbed. "Well, this time I mean it. See? Up ahead." He flicked on the turn signal, a rhythmic ticking sound that was startlingly loud in the quiet car. The turnoff was almost invisible, a narrow asphalt path that split from the main highway with no sign or fanfare. It looked less like an entrance and more like a forgotten service road, a dark scar disappearing into the deep woods. As the Cadillac made the turn, the smooth hum of the tires on the well-maintained highway was replaced by a rougher, grittier sound as they rolled onto the new surface. The car was immediately swallowed by the trees. The change was instantaneous and profound. It was as if they had driven through a portal into another world. The wide, open sky was gone, replaced by a dense, interlocking canopy of ancient pines and oaks so tall and thick that their branches knitted together overhead. The bright gold of the late afternoon was snuffed out, plunging the road into a perpetual, emerald-hued twilight. The temperature in the car, even with the windows rolled up, seemed to drop several degrees. Lisa felt a strange, prickling sensation on her skin, an involuntary shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. The excitement that had buzzed in her stomach for weeks, the thrilling prospect of exploring a real-life mansion, was slowly being replaced by a formless, creeping anxiety. The silence was the most unnerving part. The normal sounds of the countryside, the cheerful chirping of birds, the lazy hum of insects, the distant lowing of a cow, were gone. Utterly gone. The forest was as quiet as a tomb, the only sound the crunch of the tires on the asphalt and the low growl of the engine. From the front seat, Jessica Trevor shifted, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had been trying to read a novel, but her eyes kept straying to the monolithic trees that pressed in on either side of the road. She felt it too, the change in the air. It was more than just a drop in temperature. It was a shift in the very character of the world around them. An ancient, predatory stillness that made the hairs on her arms stand up. "It certainly is isolated," she commented, her voice a little too bright, a clear effort to mask the unease that was beginning to coil in her stomach. "Are you sure this is the right way, George? There isn't even a sign." "Positive," he said, his confidence unwavering as he navigated a sharp, blind curve. Spencer wanted absolute seclusion. He cherishes his privacy above all else. Part of the commission was ensuring the estate was entirely invisible and inaccessible from any public road or vantage point. A fortress of solitude, he called it. Jessica frowned. A fortress. The word sent another chill through her. She looked out at the passing trees. They didn't look like a normal forest. The trees were too old, too large. They grew in unnaturally straight lines, like silent, moss-covered soldiers standing at eternal attention. It was as if the forest itself had been cultivated for intimidation, a living wall designed to repel intruders. "He sounds less like an aristocrat and more like a hermit," she murmured, mostly to herself. George laughed, a booming sound that seemed almost sacrilegious in the oppressive quiet. "A very, very rich hermit. Don't worry, my dear. Once we're inside, you'll see. He's spared no expense. It's the most magnificent place you will ever lay eyes on." Lisa wasn't so sure. She pressed her face against the cool glass of the window, peering into the deep, dark woods. The shadows between the trees were absolute, like patches of spilled ink. She began to imagine things in them. The shape of a hunched figure, the glint of watching eyes, the pale white of a face peering from behind a thick trunk. She knew it was just her imagination, her mind playing tricks on her in the gloomy light. But she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The road continued to wind, climbing higher into the mountains. With every turn, the sense of isolation deepened. They had not passed another car, a house, or even a fence post for miles. They were utterly alone, a single metallic shell moving through a vast, silent, and increasingly hostile wilderness. Then, up ahead, something broke the endless monotony of the trees. A wall, a high stone wall, at least 15 feet tall, slick with moss and disappearing into the forest on either side. And set into it, a formidable black wrought-iron gate, its bars as thick as a man's arm, its top adorned with cruel spear-like points. Beside it stood a small concrete guardhouse, stark and utilitarian, a single yellow light glowing in its small window. It looked less like the entrance to a country estate, and more like a checkpoint for a maximum security prison. As their Cadillac rolled to a stop, 2 men emerged from the structure. They were not the friendly, tweed-clad gatekeepers of a storybook manor. They wore crisp black security uniforms that were militaristic in their cut, more akin to a specialized police unit than private guards. Their boots were polished to a mirror shine, their movements economical and precise. One man, tall and severe, his face a mask of professional detachment, had a hand resting casually on the butt of a .357 Colt Python, nestled in a polished leather holster on his hip, a cannon of a handgun, designed for stopping power. The other, broader and more brutish, held a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, carrying it with a casual familiarity that was deeply unsettling. And with the first guard was a dog. It was a Doberman Pinscher, its coat as black and sleek as polished obsidian, but it didn't move like a normal dog. It didn't sniff the air or wag its tail or strain at the leash. It sat perfectly, unnaturally still at its handler's side, a statue of coiled muscle and latent violence. Its intelligent dark eyes were fixed on the car, and Lisa felt, with a chilling certainty, that they were looking directly at her, not just seeing her, but analyzing her. The guard with the handgun approached George's window. He moved with a liquid grace that spoke of intense training. "Identification, please," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. George, momentarily taken aback by the reception, fumbled for his wallet. "George Trevor. My wife Jessica and daughter Lisa. Lord Spencer is expecting us." The guard took George's offered driver's license and compared it to a name on his clipboard. He leaned down, his eyes, hidden behind a pair of reflective sunglasses despite the gloom, scanning the car's interior. He lingered for a moment on Jessica, who met his unseen gaze with a defiant stare, then on Lisa, who quickly looked down at her lap, before returning to George. "I'll need to see identification for the other passengers as well, sir. My wife doesn't have hers in her purse and my daughter is 13, George said, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "Is this really necessary? We're expected guests." The guard's expression didn't change. "Protocol, sir." He spoke into a small radio clipped to his shoulder, his voice a clipped, professional monotone. "Gate 1. Confirming Trevor, George, plus 2 dependents. Jessica and Lisa. Awaiting visual confirmation." A squawk of static answered, followed by a muffled voice. The guard turned his head slightly, and Jessica noticed a small black camera lens mounted on a pole near the guardhouse, its red light glowing. They were being watched, recorded. "Confirmation received," the guard said into the radio. He nodded curtly and handed back the license. "Proceed, Mr. Trevor. Welcome to the Spencer estate." He stepped back, and with a low electronic hum that seemed to make the very air vibrate, the massive gates began to swing inward. As George drove through, Jessica let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her hands, she noticed, were clammy. Goodness, that was rather intense. "Security for a man of his importance," George rationalized, though his knuckles were a little white on the steering wheel. "He's involved in international pharmaceuticals, very high level. Industrial espionage is a real threat. Nothing to be concerned about." But Jessica was concerned, deeply. She had seen the guard's other hand, the one not holding the clipboard. He had never once taken it off the butt of his gun. Lisa, in the back, couldn't shake the image of the Doberman. The way its eyes had followed them, without its head ever moving. The feeling of being assessed, weighed, and categorized by something that was more weapon than animal. She felt a sudden, desperate urge to tell her father to turn back, to drive away from this cold, quiet place and go home. But she said nothing, the words catching in her throat. The final stretch of the driveway was a long, sweeping curve that climbed a gentle rise. And then, the trees parted, and they saw it. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was a geological event. A hulking stone behemoth that seemed to have erupted from the mountainside, its many spires and gables clawing at the bruised twilight sky. It was a chaotic jumble of architectural styles, part Gothic cathedral, part Victorian manor, part medieval fortress, all mashed together into a single, monstrous whole. Stone gargoyles with twisted, mocking faces perched on the eaves, their empty eyes seeming to watch the approaching car with ancient malice. It didn't look like it had been built. It looked like it had been there forever, a dark heart of stone pumping shadow into the surrounding woods. It was magnificent, yes, but it was a terrifying, oppressive magnificence, a declaration of power so absolute it was suffocating. The Cadillac rolled to a stop on the gravel of the circular drive, the crunching sound unnaturally loud in the dead air. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the place was breathtaking. George broke the silence, his voice a reverent whisper, filled with the awe of an artist beholding his finished work. "Well, here we are." He stepped out of the car, his face a mask of pride and paternal satisfaction. He didn't seem to notice the oppressive weight of the place, the way it seemed to loom over them, to press down on them. He only saw his lines, his angles, his genius. But as Lisa opened her own door, a chilling wind swept down from the peaks, rustling the dying leaves, and carrying with it a faint, almost medicinal scent, sharp and antiseptic, that pricked at the back of her throat. It was the smell of a doctor's office, of a hospital. It did not belong here. The massive carved oak doors of the mansion swung open, seemingly of their own accord, spilling a sterile, unwelcoming yellow light onto the steps. They had arrived, and the house was waiting to welcome them in.